Hello, and welcome to Shadow Me Next, a podcast where I take you into and behind the scenes of the medical world to provide you with a deeper understanding of the human side of medicine. I'm Ashley, a physician assistant, medical editor, clinical preceptor, and the creator of Shadow Me Next. It is my pleasure to introduce you to incredible members of the healthcare field and uncover their unique stories, the joys and challenges they face, and what drives them in their careers. It's access you want and stories you need. Whether you're a pre-health student or simply curious about the healthcare field, I invite you to join me as we take a conversational and personal look into the lives and minds of leaders in medicine. I don't want you to miss a single one of these conversations, so make sure that you subscribe to this podcast, which will automatically notify you when new episodes are dropped, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Shadow Me Next, where we will review highlights from this conversation and where I'll give you sneak previews of our upcoming guests. Some journeys into medicine begin with certainty, others begin with loss. In this episode, I sit down with Dr. Oluwole Babatunde, a psychiatrist whose path was shaped early by the deaths of both of his parents. What allowed him to continue was a deep sense of purpose and commitment to care that drove him to medicine and beyond. We talk about training in Nigeria, starting over in the United States, and why psychiatry became the place where his lived experience and medical skills finally met. We explore resilience, faith, education, and what it really means to adapt without losing yourself and advance without leaving others behind. Please keep in mind that the content of this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional medical advice. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. This is Shadow Me Next with Dr. Oluwole Babatunde. Dr. Babatunde, thank you so much for joining us today on Shadow Me Next. I cannot wait to chat with you about your very, very interesting career in medicine.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm so excited to be here today, and I'm glad to share some of my story, hoping it inspires people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we will, because your story itself is inspiring. And like most stories that are such, it does start off with a little bit of tragedy. So really stepping back into where you were first introduced to medicine, your mother and your father are both in healthcare. Your mother's a nurse and your father was a pharmacist, but unfortunately you lost them quite young. Would you say they are who inspired you to enter medicine originally?
Definitely. My mom was a nurse, like you said, dad pharmacist, and they inspired me. I love the way they cared for people, at least for the few years. Mom left when I was 7, dad when I was 13.
Wow.
But at least for my dad, I think I watched him a little more. I always saw him care for people, and I just wanted to care for people on a deeper level, on a higher level. Fortunately, after he died, then I was 13 years old. Shortly after that, one of his friends, who is a medical doctor, just took interest in me and was sharing how he wanted to be a doctor. He couldn't be, and he had a dream that one of his kids would be. So, wow, that works.
That was fantastic.
I'll be one of the kids that will at least carry on that legacy of caring for people. And I'm glad I was able to get into medicine.
Absolutely. And you were trained in medicine in Nigeria originally, is where you got your MD and your Master's of Public Health, which of course is just the start of your journey of all of these incredible titles that you also have. I would love to chat about that transition, if we can, from practicing medicine in Nigeria to practicing medicine in the United States. And of course, once you got to the US, you also got your PhD in epidemiology. As well. And now you're practicing psychiatrist. Tell us a little bit about that transition. Was that smooth sailing?
Of course, every good thing comes with challenges. So some of it was smooth, but of course, every good thing always has challenges built into it. And that's the way I look at life. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, Adapt and Advance, letting people realize that at every stage of life, there will always be challenges. There will be things that will be difficult. And we've just got to adapt, meaning we adjust to it without losing ourselves or losing our minds. and then to advancements. Despite the problems that come with it, we are able to still continue to go forward and make progress in everything that we lay our hands upon. So the transition was one because so after I finished medicine in Nigeria, I did residency in community medicine, and I practiced in the community for 3 years before I left. And during that practice, two things became very obvious to me. One, I loved research, which I was already doing during my master's in public health and residency in Nigeria. So I had the privilege to present some of my papers in the US then as a visitor. And then I remember my very first international trip was Brazil, then Canada, then US. So then UK, those 4 trips kind of opened my eyes to see that whatever I was doing in terms of research with my Nigerian MD and Nigerian MPH, there was just a lot to still learn at that time. And if I remember one of my posters I presented in Canada, I felt really like, oh, this doesn't look like every other person's poster. I'm like, even little things like that, it was like the quality wasn't just so good. And I just felt I needed to learn more in terms of the carrying out research itself, higher level of analysis that I can do in a place where resources are not going to be a big challenge to learning. So I felt either US, UK, Canada, whichever one works out will be good for me. So that was number one reason I left. Number two reason was during my 3-year practice after becoming an attending in Nigeria, I saw a lot of cases that were psychiatry related. And I started thinking in my heart, like looking at all my past story, I think psychiatry seems to be the best fit for me in terms of practicing medicine, because I call psychiatry like the subspecialty that is closest to being a pastor, in quotes, because we get to hear people's problems a lot. You know, for someone to come down with depression, there's always one last big trigger. Maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's unemployment, maybe it's, financial problems, whatever it is, homelessness, we get to see this every single day. People going through stressors, precipitating either depression, precipitating either anxiety for some people, precipitating even schizophrenia for some people. Although they all have mostly they have biologic bases, but at the same time, they almost always intersect with one stressor going on in their lives. So I decided, okay, I'll come to the US for my PhD. And after that, I'm going to do psychiatry residencies so I could use my story the best. Not that I tell all patients my story, no, but at least I could relate with them on a deeper level and be able to empathize and be able to show compassion, even as I care for them every single day. So the transition was relatively okay. I got an admission with, some scholarship here and there. But it was of course tough. I came with my wife and 2 kids, so we had to adjust to a new culture. We had to leave a big house in Nigeria for a very tiny place in the US that we could afford. And, we kept moving on and moving on and moving on. And we are grateful that things eventually have worked out over the years. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Babatunde, thank you so much for foreshadowing so much of the amazing things we're going to talk about too. We are absolutely going to talk about your book, Adapt and Advance. I think it is such a gift to people. And believe it or not, we're also going to talk a little bit about faith in medicine as well, because that's something that is so important to you. And I think that it is, it's a conversation that people do shy away from, but is one that is always underlying, right? It's always right there under the surface, like you mentioned. Let's step back just a second and talk about all of these titles that we've just mentioned, right? MD, MPH, which is the Masters of Public Health. And then, of course, we need to throw epidemiology in there as well at some point. How did you make all of these different decisions? And where did you find all of these? Where did you find yourself in all of these roles?
Yeah, so and that's a great question, actually. In terms of my MD, like I already mentioned, even when I was a kid, I already made up my mind I was going to be a doctor, even before the loss of my parents. And then after the loss of my parents, when a friend of my dad was like, "Oh, he really wished one of his kids was one," so okay, I'll try my best to be that kid. That would be one. So getting to medicine was rough and tough. I had to like everywhere in the world, you have to take exams and pass exams and all of that. So I had to do that. I remember one exam I had to do again for another year before I could get enough points to get me into medical school. But it was, it was tough, but it was doable. So I got in, I was glad. But that experience also prepared me for medical school. And, I made up my mind from day one, I'm going to graduate because not everybody will get into medical school, graduate.
Right.
But it was so bad in Nigeria then that, like my school, I'm sure maybe not more than 50% of us that started actually finished. It was just very rough. But I decided I was going to finish and I was going to finish well. Many challenges, difficult exams, but we go through it. And Masters in Public Health came along. It was an opportunity we had to do it because in community medicine, we do a lot of kind of research and we do a lot of things that are related to public health. So that was how Masters in Public Health came on. Then the PhD, I already gave you a little bit, was because I just realized I was presenting at conferences and I realized there was a lot of things being said that I just didn't know in terms of analysis. And I just wanted to be good at whatever I was doing. And I felt I wouldn't get the best if I stayed back to do my PhD in Nigeria. I just wanted to do it in a place where there's a lot of resources and where I can, have access. Being here, it's just easy to learn it. You have access to it much more easily compared to when I was in Nigeria. So that was what brought me to PhD. Epidemiology, because it was closer to Masters in Public Health. That was the closest thing to it. Just continuing from where I stopped in Nigeria. So that was what epidemiology. Then after that, we have residency in psychiatry, which I already touched a little bit about. I really felt that burden in my heart to do a specialty in the US where I could be very empathetic and I could really relate with what people are going through. I haven't lost my mom at 7, lost my dad at 13, and been through a lot of financial hardship going through school and all of that. I relate easily with people, and I find it easy to empathize and be able to reach out to them on that level of it's going to be okay. Life can really be difficult for us at times. And that brings us to the PhD, then the residency in the US in psychiatry. And I think, so that's how, but in all of it, I think the biggest for me is, which I would say to everybody listening, is no matter what level you are right now, depending on our purpose. So one thing I would say is we have different purposes and we have to understand what our purpose is. Does everybody really need to go to school this long? I don't believe so. I believe for some people, if, for example, you discover your purpose very early and my purpose is to be a businessman, for example, and you know how to get there, of course, go ahead and move there. But I always encourage every young people to at least get as much formal education as they are able to. Not necessarily a PhD, even a bachelor's is just what you believe is you need for what you have. I strongly believe it's important for us to get some. In fact, a chapter in my book was dedicated to formal education. But I also had a chapter right next to it where I talked about informal education, meaning there's a lot we can learn without even going to school at all. And we don't need, we just need to look all around us. We see a lot of very successful people with not so much of formal education. So formal education is not everything, but I believe a little bit of it, if only what it trains us is the discipline of beginning and finishing something. I believe it's a discipline we need in our world today. And, the process of learning every day, waking up, going to classes, it teaches you something that stays with you forever. Try hard to get at least a bachelor's minimum. That's my recommendation. It's not compulsory. We have a lot of successful people without it, but I would still recommend it, at least for the discipline that you get from it. And then, it helps you just see life in a different way, the people you meet along the journey and all of that.
No, it's beautiful. And it exemplifies a really important equation in medicine. And that's purpose, which is what you've mentioned, plus discipline, which is also what you've mentioned, equals resiliency. And I think that is something in medicine that we have to have, especially with you and your journey. I mean, unfortunately, your resiliency started developing very, very, very young when you were still a child, basically. But without purpose, we don't have that heart focus. And without discipline, well, we haven't overcome challenges, and you need both of those to really develop resiliency, to realize you are where you need to be doing what you need to do. And I love that. I think that's so beautiful. Dr. Babatunde, before we get into a day in your life as a psychiatrist, would you have done anything differently?
Honestly, I don't think so. Including even the loss of my parents, as much as tragic as it was, maybe time has passed and I've looked back again and again. I meditate a lot. I think through things. I don't think I would have chosen anything different looking back at everything and where I am today. Of course, I'm not yet where I want to be. There's just still a whole lot of plans in front. I have 50-year plans, at least from where I am, that I plan, one after the other. 5-year plan I have, of course. I plan every week. I plan every month. I plan every year. And I have many other things I still want to do and how I want to impact, with my story to people. But looking back, I don't think there's anything I would have chosen differently. I read books a lot. Like I read one book every week, beginning from year 2000. But most of it is audio, so that makes it easier. My whole idea about reading, and I encourage people to do that, is I say at least one book every month to every young person growing up, a book that can encourage you, that can stimulate you, that can help you know that, no matter what you're going through, people have been through this before, not to minimize your pain. So I reference that because I read a lot and I've read a lot of stories of people from time to time. And these stories always encourage me to know that people have been through very difficult situations. Of course, every person is unique. Every situation is unique. So I don't want to minimize anybody's pain or to just say anything is similar to each other. No, you are different and the dynamics of your life is different. But you can learn from other people. I read a lot, I learn from other people, but I also believe there's also the place for your own personal experience that, reading might not be able to substitute completely for that. So learning is good from other people, but there are some things you are also meant to experience or go through as a person to help you going forward.
The personal experience is something that we speak so highly about, I think, because we are proud of our experiences. But like you mentioned, sometimes those personal experiences are traumatic or they're not desired. Like you mentioned, those experiences are what builds resiliency. So if you are in the thick of one of those moments where you just don't know which way is up, you don't know which way to turn, if you can take a step back and say, perhaps this is one of those resiliency building moments. And if I can just continue to forge through, if I continue to put one foot in front of the other and build on this situation, let's use it for good. And Adapt and Advance is a book that we've talked about already. And this is really your gift and a great place to start for anybody who might find themselves in that situation. And I giggle, Adapt and Advance. It makes me think of your background in epidemiology. There's plenty of things that are adapting and advancing there as well. But tell us a little bit more about this book. Primarily, who is this book for?
Okay. Yeah, that's very exciting to me, Ashley. So I wrote this book because I wanted to put my story out and let people know no matter what you are going through, you can adapt. And what that means is you can adjust without losing your mind, without losing yourself. Mm-hmm. And then you can advance, meaning you can go forward despite the challenges that you are going through. Honestly, I would say this book is for everyone, because we all go through challenges, but most for young people, people in college, people in high school, just because it's a vital developmental moment of our life where we are trying to develop our philosophy of life and understand how best life should play out for us. So it's important for us I would say the things I learned at those stages of my life were very, very helpful for me. And that's when I was in college when I started reading one book every week. And I think that would be the best decision of my life if I'm asked to say one thing that has been most helpful for me in my life is reading.
Here on Shadow Me Next, we help you prepare for your own interviews with quality questions, things the clinicians we shadow have actually heard on real interviews. One of my favorite interview questions is this: what is one thing that has been most influential in your life? Not the most impressive, not the most polished, the most formative. This question reveals how someone reflects, how they make meaning, and how they've been shaped by experience. In healthcare, that matters more than rehearsed answers. So before your next interview, ask yourself, why does this experience still matter to me? How did it shape how I show up for others? And what did it teach me about resilience, empathy, or purpose? And then practice telling that story with reflection, not performance. Keep in mind that there's more interview prep, such as mock interviews and personal statement review, over on shadowmenext.com. There you'll find amazing resources to help you as you prepare to answer your own quality questions.
Not necessarily school books, of course. I have to read school books to pass my exams, but learning about life generally. Just so much we can learn from people that have succeeded or people that have gone ahead. And so Adapt and Advance is a book for young people mainly, but generally for everybody. In it, I used seven main sections. I used the MAP LAMP acronym, M meaning making. I pulled from Viktor Frankl's book on Man's Search for Meaning. It was one of the Holocaust survivors. And he said he gave 3 main ways to make meaning, which has stayed with me so much. I use it. I make meaning of any challenging situation I pass through in life very quickly because of that book. He said one is to look at the big picture, or how you can help people despite the problem you're having. So whatever you're going through does not stop you from still having a smile in the middle of it. It might be tough, or still being able to help people in the middle of it. That means you are looking at the bigger picture, that this problem has not come to destroy me or grind me to a halt. Rather, it has come to build me up. So, which brings us to the second thing, is your attitude towards the problem. So we need to have the right attitude towards whatever we are going through. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It was never easy. I can smile about talking about my past now, but there were days I cried. There were days I locked myself up in the room. I'm like, God, why did this happen to me? How I wished that, my parents were here, especially those times when you see other people, doing very well, supportive parents, and you are just there. And, it's just so tough to even get tuition for school paid. You just don't even know what the next day holds. So, but in the midst of everything, our attitude towards it matters a lot. And the third one is experiencing someone or something, which could be experiencing nature, it could be experiencing a loved one. For me, I experience music every day because one hiding place for me the most since I lost my parents was music. Music was very helpful. I remember even then I'll pick a church hymn book and read. I remember the songs we sang at their funeral. It was very comforting to me at very difficult periods. I know all of that was very, very helpful from the experience. So that's meaning making. A is action. Action is action. We don't have to say a lot about it. You've just got to put action behind your dreams. Dreams only come to pass when you back it up with action. I have all those degrees, I have all this schooling, but it's been a lot of action, a lot of work. And now that I'm done schooling, I'm grateful. I'm also even still working very hard. Every single day, I put in my best to what I'm doing. I always tell myself every morning, part of my confessions every morning to myself is I want to go to my bed at night empty. Empty meaning I want to pour out every good thing in me that is in me to be a blessing to people around me. My patients, my residents, my students, everybody, co-workers. I want to go to bed empty every night so that when I die in my old age, I want to go to my grave empty. Everything that is in me, I want to pour it out. So action is what leads to that. Put action behind things. You just don't dream, put action behind it. Wake up every morning and do something. one thing every day towards your big dreams in life. P is planning. I use the COPS model, which is clarify, capture first. Thoughts come to your mind. You don't want to lose it. Capture it. I use sticky notes a lot. Capture, clarify your thoughts, then prioritize it, simplify it. You use that framework, to keep planning every day. And then L is learning. I've talked about this. One book a week for me. I recommend one book a month for everybody listening. Listen to books that helps you, that encourage you. Read biographies of people who you want your life to look like when you grow up. I do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then A is alliance formation, good relationship with people. M is mission statement. So you've got to have a mission statement. Whatever, no matter how little it is, if I just say it's just to be a blessing to people, or to be a good father, good mother, or good spouse, whatever it is your mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
I have something. I have mine that I say to myself every single day. And the last one is prayer or prayer equivalents. If you are a person of faith, prayer might be easy. If you're not a person of faith, I believe there are prayer mental equivalents that are also equivalent to what prayer is for everybody. So that's the structure I used in the book. And every chapter I shared my personal stories, and I shared the stories of other successful people that used the principle in that chapter. So it's a book I recommend strongly to everybody to read.
It is such a wonderful book. I'm gonna quickly rattle off those things that you just elaborated on. Look at the big picture, have a good attitude, experience something, putting action behind your dreams. I love that. That is a great takeaway. Planning, learning, alliance. That means being in relationships, having a mission statement that goes back to our purpose, right? And then prayer. And that is just a perfect takeaway for us to wrap up with. And that is prayer and faith, whatever that might look like for you. Dr. Babatunde, what would you say to somebody who says that faith and medicine are not symbiotic, that they don't belong together?
I would say, for me, I see that they belong together because one way or the other, everything I do, they come from the same source for me. And I strongly believe they mix together one way or the other. Faith, even for example, in psychiatry, there's a lot of research, for example, that shows that people who are of faith tend to do better with certain disorders because their faith tends to help them, be more resilient during it. And even, for example, things like addiction, for example, AA that people go to, one of the reasons are called Anonymous is successful is because they believe in a higher power. They use higher power, of course, not necessarily a particular faith, whatever you believe in. At times, we just want to hold on to something higher than us. And I believe that's something that helps. So I believe they mix together. And most of what I do, of course, I don't mention my faith at work like that to patients, but most of my values from my faith, I live it out every day and in my day-to-day interactions with people. The biggest, for example, for the Christian faith is the two big laws is to love God, love others. So I believe the whole world would be a good place if we all love others, at least, the second one. If we do things out of love and out of a mission in that I want to be a blessing to other people. So I believe they mix together one way or the other because it could serve as the foundation. People want to talk to providers that are real, that are genuine, and that are able to empathize with them, not just doing it for the sake of the money. Of course, the money is good, part of it, but I want every patient that leaves me to remember me for something. I always leave them with one. For example, I always tell them, to always be the best version of yourself whenever I'm discharging a patient. I always tell them, I want you to remind me for this one thing. So I want to leave a good taste in their mouth, not that I just treated them and gave them medications alone, but I want them to go and know that someone truly cares about them.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. Dr. Babatunde, his book is Adapt and Advance, a faith-based step-by-step guide to turning trials into triumphs. It's available on Amazon. I'll link it in the show notes below. Thank you so much for taking the time today, for describing your journey, and for just being such an incredible human. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm deeply grateful. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so very much for listening to this episode of Shadow Me Next. If you liked this episode, or if you think it could be useful for a friend, please subscribe and invite them to join us next Monday. As always, if you have any questions, let me know on Facebook or Instagram. Access you want, stories you need. You're always invited to Shadow Me Next.